Have you ever been deliberately excluded from a family gathering while everyone pretended nothing was happening? What I'm about to share with you will make your blood boil, but stick around because the ending will restore your faith in standing up for yourself. If you're watching this, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from as I tell you about the night that changed everything. My name is Sarah, and I'm 32 years old. 3 months ago, I never imagined that a single dinner party would completely transform my marriage and my relationship with my husband's family. But sometimes, the most painful moments become the catalyst for the most profound change. Let me take you back to where this all began. I grew up in a working-class family in Detroit. My dad spent 28 years working the assembly line at Ford, and my mom cleaned office buildings at night to help make ends meet. They sacrificed everything to give me opportunities they never had. I was the first person in my family to graduate college, working 2 jobs and taking out student loans to earn my degree in elementary education. By the time I met Jason, I had built a fulfilling career teaching 2nd grade in an inner-city school. The work was challenging, but rewarding, helping kids from backgrounds similar to my own discover their potential. I lived in a small apartment, drove a 10-year-old Honda, and spent my weekends volunteering at the local literacy center. My life wasn't flashy, but it was meaningful and entirely self-made. I met Jason at a charity fundraiser 2.5 years ago. He was there representing his family's law firm, and I was volunteering at the registration table. When our eyes met across that crowded hotel ballroom, it felt like something out of a romantic movie. He was devastatingly handsome in his expensive suit, with warm brown eyes and a smile that made my knees weak. Jason came from a completely different world than mine. His father, Richard, built one of the most prestigious law firms in the state, and his mother, Patricia, came from what people call old money. Jason had attended elite private schools and Ivy League universities, moving in social circles I'd only read about in magazines. Despite our vastly different backgrounds, we connected on a level that surprised us both. He was brilliant and driven, but also genuinely kind and down-to-earth, in a way that belied his privileged upbringing. Our courtship was intense and passionate. Within 8 months, he proposed during a weekend getaway to Napa Valley. I said yes without hesitation, believing that love could bridge any gap between our worlds. Looking back now, I realize how naive that assumption was. I had no idea how deep class prejudices could run, especially when someone felt threatened by change. Meeting Jason's parents for the first time should have been my warning. Richard was cordially distant, a distinguished man with silver temples, who seemed more comfortable discussing legal precedents than getting to know his future daughter-in-law. But Patricia was in a league of her own. She was impeccably dressed in designer clothing that probably cost more than I made in 3 months, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a smile that never quite reached her calculating blue eyes. Throughout that first dinner at their country club, Patricia interrogated me with questions disguised as polite conversation. Where exactly had I grown up? What kind of work did my parents do? Which schools had I attended? Each answer seemed to register as another disappointment. Though she maintained a veneer of sophisticated politeness, she managed to mention Jason's ex-girlfriend Rebecca multiple times, noting her family's prominence in local society and her father's position as chief of surgery at the city's most exclusive hospital. Jason and Rebecca were such a striking couple at last year's charity gala. Patricia reminisced, showing me photos on her phone. Her family has been part of our social circle for generations. Such a pity they grew apart. Jason seemed oblivious to these subtle attacks. He adored his mother and couldn't see past her polished facade. Whenever I gently mentioned her behavior later, he would rush to defend her motives. "Mom's just being protective," he'd say. "She wants to make sure I'm making good choices. Give her some time to adjust." Unfortunately, time only made things worse. Jason's sister Amanda initially seemed friendly enough, asking about my teaching and complimenting my jewelry, but there was an underlying competitiveness to every interaction, a constant need to mention her own achievements, or subtly correct my etiquette at family gatherings. Jason's brother Kevin and his wife Lauren maintained polite but distant interactions, clearly following Patricia's lead in keeping me at arm's length. I later discovered that Lauren had faced similar treatment when she first joined the family, but had eventually earned acceptance by leaving her nursing career to work at Richard's law firm. I tried everything imaginable to win Patricia's approval. I brought thoughtful gifts to family events, researched topics she was passionate about, and offered to volunteer for her various charity committees. Each effort was either ignored or dismissed with backhanded comments. The crystal picture frame I gave her for Mother's Day somehow never made it out of its gift box. My offer to help organize her annual charity auction was declined because the planning committee was already full. When I wore what I thought was an appropriate dress to a family wedding, she loudly asked another guest if they thought the color was too bold for such a solemn occasion. The only family member who showed me genuine warmth was my own Aunt Carol, my father's sister, who had moved to the area for work and occasionally attended family functions. Carol became my lifeline during those increasingly difficult months, offering perspective and support when I felt like I was drowning in Patricia's hostility. When the invitation arrived for Patricia's elaborate birthday celebration, I approached it with both hope and dread. The embossed card specified cocktail attire and promised an evening of fine dining prepared by a renowned local chef. 25 guests would be attending, including extended family and close friends. "This is really important to Mum," Jason told me as we prepared for the evening. "She's been planning this for weeks, and everyone who matters to our family will be there. I want everything to go perfectly." I spent hours getting ready, wearing an elegant navy dress I'd saved for months to afford, with my hair professionally styled and makeup carefully applied to strike the right balance between polished and understated. If only I had known then how dramatically that evening would unfold, and how it would force me to find a strength I never knew I possessed. The night of Patricia's birthday celebration arrived with perfect October weather. Jason and I pulled up to his parents' impressive estate in our Camry, joining a line of luxury vehicles in the circular driveway. The house was lit like something from a magazine spread, with landscape lighting, showcasing the manicured gardens and Georgian architecture. "You look beautiful," Jason said, squeezing my hand as we approached the ornate front door. I had spent considerable time and money preparing for this evening, hoping that my appearance would meet the family's exacting standards. Patricia greeted guests at the entrance herself, embracing Jason warmly and telling him how handsome he looked in his designer suit. When she turned to me, her smile cooled considerably. She offered a brief air kiss that didn't actually make contact with my cheek. "Sarah, how nice that you could make it," she said, as though my attendance had been questionable. She made no comment about my appearance before turning her attention to the next guests. The interior was breathtaking, with crystal chandeliers casting warm light over elegantly decorated rooms, filled with about 30 people in formal attire. Servers in crisp uniforms circulated with champagne and elaborate appetizers, while a pianist played softly in the background. As Jason led me through the gathering, I recognized many faces from previous family events: Richard's law partners, Patricia's charity committee friends, various cousins and family friends from their exclusive social circle. Patricia's sister Margaret held court near the fireplace, gesturing dramatically as she regaled listeners with stories from her recent European vacation. While mingling, I couldn't help but notice the family photographs displayed throughout the rooms. There were professional portraits of Jason and his siblings as children, candid shots from exotic family vacations, and formal pictures from various social events. I searched carefully but couldn't find a single photograph from our wedding, despite seeing recent pictures of both Kevin and Amanda with their spouses prominently displayed. The dining room was set for exactly 25 guests, with fine china, crystal stemware and silver flatware arranged with mathematical precision. Name cards in elegant calligraphy marked each place setting, and the long mahogany table was adorned with stunning floral arrangements of white orchids and roses. "Quite the production, isn't it?" a familiar voice said behind me. I turned to find Carol, looking elegant in a deep purple gown, her graying hair styled in her signature chignon. I hadn't known she would be attending, and her presence immediately eased my anxiety. "Carol, thank God you're here," I said, embracing her genuinely. I was starting to feel overwhelmed by all the formality. "Patricia invited me because Richard insisted," she said with a knowing wink. They were college acquaintances, something Patricia conveniently forgets when it suits her, but Richard made sure I was included tonight. Throughout the cocktail hour, I began noticing subtle patterns of exclusion that had become all too familiar. Servers consistently bypassed me when offering canapés, requiring me to actively request items that were freely offered to other guests. When Amanda showed everyone her new diamond earrings, an anniversary gift from her husband, Patricia made pointed comments about quality jewelry coming from generations of refined taste, while glancing meaningfully at my modest accessories. The most obvious slight came when Patricia personally refilled champagne glasses throughout the room, engaging each guest in brief but warm conversation. She topped off Carol's glass while asking about her recent promotion at work. Then, without acknowledging me at all, she turned to move away, her elbow accidentally bumping my arm and causing champagne to splash onto my navy dress. "Oh my," she said without genuine concern. "You should take care of that immediately. The powder room is down the hall. Second door on the right." In the bathroom, I dabbed at the stain with damp paper towels, fighting back tears of frustration and embarrassment. Through the thin walls, I could hear voices from the adjacent room, which I realized was Patricia's home office. "She's trying so desperately hard," Patricia's voice said clearly. "That dress is obviously department store quality. And those shoes with that handbag. It's painful to watch someone so out of their element." "Mom, be kind," Amanda's voice replied, though she was laughing. "Jason does seem happy with her." "For now," Patricia responded coolly. "Rebecca called last week. You know, still single and asking about Jason. I've always believed they would find their way back to each other eventually." I froze completely, the damp towel pressed against my dress. Jason had dated Rebecca for 4 years before meeting me. According to Jason, they had broken up because they wanted different things from life. I had no idea they were still in contact, much less that Patricia was actively maintaining those connections. When I returned to the party, Jason was deep in conversation with his father about upcoming changes at the law firm. He barely registered my return, nodding absently when I touched his arm to let him know I was back. The strain of maintaining a pleasant expression while feeling increasingly unwelcome was becoming exhausting. I found myself counting the minutes until we could politely leave. Finally, Patricia announced that dinner would be served. Guests began moving toward the dining room, searching for their assigned seats among the elegant place cards. I walked slowly around the table, checking each beautifully calligraphed name, but couldn't find mine anywhere. "Jason," I whispered urgently. "I don't see my place card anywhere on the table." He looked genuinely surprised, then shrugged it off casually. "Probably just an oversight. Here, you can sit between me and Carol." He pulled up an additional chair from against the wall, disrupting the careful symmetry of the place settings. The chair had no charger plate, no array of crystal glasses, none of the elaborate place setting that adorned every other seat. Patricia noticed immediately, her eyes flashing with barely contained irritation. "Jason, we had the seating arranged very precisely," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "It's fine, Mom. Sarah can sit here," he replied, seemingly oblivious to the deliberate nature of my exclusion. As everyone settled into their assigned seats, I felt Patricia's disapproving glances every time I spoke or laughed. When I answered Richard's polite question about my teaching with an anecdote about one of my students' breakthrough moments, Patricia interrupted to ask Kevin's wife about their recent vacation to Martha's Vineyard, effectively cutting me off mid-sentence. The tension was building steadily, but I had no idea how much worse the evening was about to become. The dining room glowed with candlelight from dozens of tapers, and the antique crystal chandelier overhead. Fine china gleamed against the dark wood table, each place setting accompanied by an intimidating array of silverware that made me silently grateful for the etiquette lessons Carol had given me months earlier. Once everyone was seated, servers appeared from the kitchen in perfect choreography. The head server announced the first course, a delicate butternut squash soup, with truffle oil, as elegant white bowls were placed before each guest. Each guest, except me. I sat there awkwardly as everyone around me received their appetizer. Jason was engaged in an animated discussion with Kevin about quarterly revenue projections and didn't immediately notice my empty space. Carol, however, did. "Excuse me," she said to a passing server. "My niece didn't receive the first course." The server looked uncomfortable and glanced toward Patricia, who smiled serenely from the head of the table. "I believe we're one portion short," Patricia said smoothly. The chef prepared exactly the right amount for our invited guests. Perhaps Sarah could share with Jason. The implication couldn't have been clearer. I hadn't been included in the original count because I hadn't really been invited, merely tolerated as Jason's accessory. Jason finally noticed the situation and frowned slightly. "Mom, couldn't the kitchen prepare another portion? The soup is quite complex, dear. It was prepared in exact quantities. I'm sure Sarah understands." Her tone suggested that making an issue of it would be terribly inappropriate. Jason hesitated, then pushed his bowl slightly toward me. "We can share," he said quietly, before returning to his conversation with Kevin. I took a small spoonful of the soup, my appetite vanishing with each passing moment. Around the table, conversation flowed about business ventures, recent travels, and Amanda's daughter's acceptance to an exclusive prep school. I remained silent, feeling increasingly invisible. When the second course arrived, pan-seared scallops with a white wine reduction, the pattern repeated exactly. Everyone received a serving, except me. This time I didn't bother pointing it out, and neither did Jason. He absently offered me one of his scallops while debating the merits of different investment strategies with his cousin. By the third course, a palate-cleansing lemon sorbet, I noticed several guests casting uncomfortable glances in my direction as I continued to sit with an empty place setting. Richard appeared confused but said nothing, apparently deferring to his wife's management of the dinner, as he had presumably done for decades. Then came the main course. Servers entered carrying silver platters with perfectly cooked filet mignon, each steak prepared to individual preferences and accompanied by roasted root vegetables and garlic mashed potatoes. The aroma filled the room as appreciative murmurs rippled around the table. A server placed plates before each person until he reached me. Instead of the elegant steak dinner everyone else received, he set down a small mixed green salad with no dressing. The contrast between my sparse plate and the elaborate meals surrounding me couldn't have been more stark or deliberate. Carol set down her fork with a sharp clink against her plate. "Patricia, why does Sarah have a salad when everyone else has steak?" The table fell completely silent, conversations halting as attention turned to our end. Patricia's smile remained perfectly fixed, but her eyes grew ice cold. "I only ordered for family," she said, her voice honey-sweet, but laced with unmistakable venom. "The steaks were quite expensive, imported from Japan. I'm sure Sarah appreciates something lighter anyway." The silence that followed was absolutely deafening. I could feel every eye in the room focused on me, waiting for my reaction. Next to me, Jason continued cutting his steak, his eyes fixed firmly on his plate. "Am I family or not?" I asked him quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. Derek glanced up, his expression pained and conflicted. "Don't do this. Not here," he muttered, still chewing. That was the moment something inside me finally shattered. 2 years of subtle insults, deliberate exclusions, and pretending not to notice had culminated in this public humiliation. I had endured Patricia's passive-aggressive behavior for Jason's sake, believing that eventually she would accept me. But sitting there with a plain salad while everyone else enjoyed premium steak, I realized that nothing would ever change unless I made it change. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling slightly in my lap, and found my voice. "Actually," I said, my words cutting through the uncomfortable silence, "I'd like to address something that can no longer be ignored." The conversations around the table gradually died as people realized I was speaking. Jason tensed beside me, his fork freezing halfway to his mouth. "Sarah," he whispered urgently. "Not now." But I continued, my gaze fixed directly on Patricia at the head of the table. "For 2 years I have tried to be part of this family. I have overlooked the slights, excused the deliberate exclusions, and accepted being treated as less than welcome. But tonight has made something crystal clear that I can no longer pretend doesn't exist." Patricia's smile remained frozen, though her knuckles whitened around her wineglass. "I'm not sure what you mean, dear. This hardly seems like the appropriate time for whatever complaint you've imagined." "Imagine," I repeated, maintaining my composure despite my racing heart. "Let me be specific then. Tonight, I was the only person not given a place card. I was the only one servers consistently overlooked for drinks and appetizers. I received a plain salad while everyone else enjoyed steak, and now no dessert while everyone else is served." I looked around the table, meeting the eyes of each family member. Some looked away uncomfortably, others appeared genuinely surprised, as if they hadn't noticed the pattern until I pointed it out. But this isn't just about tonight, I continued steadily. It's about the Christmas gift exchange, where everyone received presents except me, because I wasn't on the family list. It's about family vacation photos, where I was asked to step aside so you could capture just the family. It's about my wedding picture being the only one missing from your family photo displays. Richard frowned, looking genuinely perplexed. Patricia, is this accurate? Before Patricia could respond, Carol spoke up firmly. It's all true, Richard. I've witnessed it myself on numerous occasions. This is absolutely ridiculous, Patricia said, her voice rising slightly for the first time. Sarah has always been overly sensitive. We have done nothing but welcome her into our home. Welcome me? I echoed in disbelief. You have systematically excluded me from day one. You compare me unfavorably to Rebecca at every opportunity. You dismiss my career, my background, everything about me. Jason finally found his voice, though not in the way I had hoped. Sarah, you're embarrassing yourself, and my family. This is my mother's birthday celebration. His words stung worse than anything Patricia had ever done to me. Your family, I repeated slowly. After 2 years of marriage, I'm still not part of your family in your mind. That's not what I meant, Jason backpedaled, looking around at the uncomfortable faces of his relatives. Isn't it? I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. 2 weeks ago, you and your mother exchanged messages about me. Would you like me to read them to the entire room? Jason's face went pale. You went through my phone. I didn't have to. You left it open on the nightstand when you went to shower. The notification from your mother caught my eye. I scrolled to a screenshot I had saved. Your mother wrote, and I quote, Sarah looked completely out of place at the club fundraiser. Could you not have helped her choose more appropriate attire? Rebecca always understood these events naturally. Gasps and murmurs rippled around the table. Amanda looked down at her plate. Kevin and Lauren exchanged meaningful glances. And you replied. I continued, my voice finally cracking with emotion. I know, Mom. Sometimes I wonder if she'll ever really fit in with our world. You never defended me, I said to Jason, tears threatening to fall. Not once in 2 years have you stood up to your mother when she belittled me. How dare you, Patricia hissed, her composed facade finally cracking. Jason has given you a life you never could have achieved on your own. A nobody from a nothing family, and this is your gratitude. Mother, Amanda exclaimed, genuinely shocked by the naked hostility. Richard stood up, his napkin falling to the floor. Patricia, that's enough. No, Richard, it's not enough. Patricia continued, her carefully constructed image crumbling completely. She has never been good enough for our son, and everyone at this table knows it. I've simply been the only one with the courage to acknowledge it. Jason looked torn, his gaze moving between his mother and me, his face a mask of anguish. Mom, please stop. Choose, Jason, Patricia demanded, her voice cold and final. Right now, your family or her. The silence that followed her ultimatum was absolute. 24 pairs of eyes turned to Jason, waiting for his response. I held my breath, part of me still hoping against all evidence that he would finally choose me, would finally stand up for our marriage. Jason swallowed hard, looked at his mother, then at me, then down at his half-eaten dinner. His silence was answer enough. I stood up slowly, placing my napkin beside my empty plate, with as much dignity as I could manage. Thank you for making this so abundantly clear, both of you. I won't stay where I'm not wanted or respected. I walked out of the dining room with my head held high, though inside I was crumbling. No one called after me. No one followed, not even Jason. In the foyer, I collected my coat from the confused staff member and stepped out into the cool October night. I made it to our car before the tears finally came, and I sobbed until my throat was raw. Behind me, I heard footsteps on the gravel driveway. Sarah, wait. It was Carol, not Jason. I need to go, I said, fumbling with my keys through my tears. I know, sweetheart, but you shouldn't drive when you're this upset. Let me follow you home to make sure you get there safely. I can handle this, I insisted, though my hands were shaking. I know you can, Carol said firmly, but you don't have to handle it alone. And Sarah, What you did in there took incredible courage. I'm proud of you. As I drove away from the estate, I glanced in my rearview mirror. Carol's headlights followed steadily behind me, but there was no sign of Jason in the driveway. No indication that my husband had chosen to follow his wife, instead of remaining with his mother. That told me everything I needed to know about where I truly stood in his priorities. The weeks that followed were some of the most difficult of my life. Jason called constantly, alternating between anger and hollow apologies that never quite addressed the real issues. His messages ranged from demanding I return home immediately to half-hearted attempts at reconciliation that always seemed to blame me for disrupting family harmony. Then came the unexpected support from places I never anticipated. Kevin called me privately, something he had never done before. "Sarah, I want you to know that Lauren and I support you completely," he said, awkwardly. "What happened at that dinner was inexcusable. Mom has always been controlling, but this crossed every line imaginable." Later that week, Lauren sent me a heartfelt text. "When I first married Kevin, Patricia treated me similarly, though not as severely as what you endured. It took me years of compromising who I was before she accepted me. You shouldn't have to change yourself to earn basic respect." Even Amanda reached out, showing up at Carol's apartment where I was staying. "I should have said something that night," she admitted, looking genuinely remorseful. "I've watched Mom treat you poorly for 2 years and stayed silent because I was afraid of becoming her next target." The most surprising support came from Richard himself, who called me directly. "Sarah, this is Richard," he said formally. "I want to apologize for what happened in our home. I had no idea the extent of Patricia's behavior, though I should have been more observant and more involved." While these unexpected allies helped ease some of the pain, Jason's behavior grew increasingly concerning. He seemed to oscillate between genuine remorse and defensive anger, never fully grasping the fundamental problem. 2 weeks after the dinner, he delivered an ultimatum of his own. "Either you come home and make peace with my mother, or we need to seriously reconsider our marriage." That same day, I received a certified letter from an attorney representing Patricia, claiming I had borrowed and failed to return several pieces of jewelry from family gatherings. It was a complete fabrication and an obvious attempt at intimidation. That evening, I called my friend Maria, a teacher colleague who had become like a sister to me. She listened to the entire story without interruption. "Sarah, what you're describing is textbook toxic family dynamics," she said finally. "Jason is completely enmeshed with his mother. He may love you, but he's been programmed his entire life to prioritize her approval above everything else." "So what do I do?" I asked. "First, document everything. Every text message, email, that ridiculous lawyer's letter, and second, I think you should consult with a divorce attorney, even if it's just to understand your options." The word divorce hit me like a physical blow. Despite everything, I hadn't allowed myself to think that far ahead. But Maria was right. I needed to protect myself. 3 days later, I sat in a family law attorney's office, reviewing my situation and learning about what separation or divorce might entail. I wasn't making any decisions yet, but knowledge felt like power in a situation where I'd felt powerless for so long. That evening, Jason called with a subdued tone I hadn't heard before. "Can we meet? Just to talk, somewhere neutral?" After a moment's hesitation, I agreed. "The coffee shop near Carol's apartment. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock. "I'll be there," he promised. I hung up wondering if this meeting would provide closure or a new beginning. Either way, I was no longer the same woman who had sat silently accepting disrespect at Patricia's table. That version of Sarah was gone forever, replaced by someone who finally understood her own worth. The coffee shop was bustling with afternoon customers. When I arrived precisely on time, I chose a corner table that offered some privacy without complete isolation, cradling a mug of black coffee I was too nervous to actually drink. When Jason walked in, I barely recognized him. In just 3 weeks, he seemed to have aged significantly. His usually impeccable appearance was disheveled, his hair unkempt, with dark circles prominent under his eyes. "Thank you for meeting me," he said formally, settling into the chair across from me with his own untouched coffee. "You wanted to talk," I replied, keeping my voice carefully neutral. "So talk." Jason took a shaky breath, seeming to gather his thoughts. "I've been doing a tremendous amount of thinking these past weeks. and I realize I owe you more than just an apology. The way everything unfolded at the dinner was completely inappropriate. I raised an eyebrow. Inappropriate? Is that really the word you want to use for what your mother did to me? He shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Sarah, I'm trying here. Are you? Because it sounds like you're minimizing what happened. Your mother deliberately humiliated me, and you allowed it to happen. Then you demanded that I apologize to her. I know, he said quietly, his voice dropping almost to a whisper. I know how that must have sounded. At the time I was just reacting the way I always have, when Mom gets upset. We all scramble to smooth things over and restore peace, even when she's completely wrong. I asked pointedly. Especially then, he admitted with painful honesty. It's always been easier to appease her than to confront her directly. I pulled a manila folder from my bag and placed it on the table between us. I brought something I want you to see. What is this? He asked warily. Evidence, I said simply. Open it. Inside were printed copies of text exchanges, emails, and photographs documenting 2 years of systematic exclusion and undermining by Patricia, all organized chronologically with dates and detailed explanations. Jason flipped through the pages slowly, his expression growing more troubled with each revelation. You kept records of all this, he asked, in amazement. Not intentionally at first, but after a while, I started documenting incidents because you always dismissed my concerns. I needed proof for myself that I wasn't imagining things or being overly sensitive. He paused at the screenshot of his text exchange with Patricia about me not fitting in. I remember this conversation. I was frustrated that night, feeling like there was always tension between you and Mom. I should never have written that. No, you shouldn't have, I agreed firmly. But what hurts even more is that you never once defended me. Not in all these documented incidents. The waitress approached our table with a coffee pot. Everything going okay here? She asked, perhaps sensing the emotional intensity. We're fine, thank you, Jason replied automatically. After she moved away, he leaned forward intently. Sarah, I want to tell you what happened after you left the dinner party. I steeled myself for whatever was coming. Go ahead. After you walked out, there was this horrible, suffocating silence. Then Patricia's sister started saying, you were overreacting, and Mom began crying about how disrespectful and ungrateful you were. But then Dad did something I've never seen him do before. What? I asked, genuinely curious, despite my anger. He stood up and said, enough, Patricia. What you did tonight was deliberately cruel and I won't pretend otherwise. Jason's voice grew stronger as he continued. He told everyone at that table that he'd watched for years as Mom controlled who was considered family and who wasn't, and that he was ashamed of both her behavior and mine. I blinked in surprise. Richard had always seemed so passive in the face of Patricia's controlling behavior. He took me aside afterward and said something I can't stop thinking about. He told me, I failed to protect your mother from her worst impulses when we were young, and now you're failing to protect your wife. Don't make my mistake, son. It leads to a lifetime of regret. What did you say to him? I asked. Nothing meaningful at first. I was still defending Mom out of habit, but then Dad showed me something that changed everything. Jason pulled out his phone and scrolled through his photos. This. He handed me the device. On the screen was a photograph I had never seen before, showing Richard as a young man with an attractive woman at what appeared to be a college formal dance. That's Dad and your Aunt Carol, Jason explained. They dated seriously in college for almost 3 years. Dad was planning to propose. I looked up in shock. What happened? His parents disapproved completely. Carol came from a working-class background and was putting herself through school. Sound familiar? His parents pressured him to end the relationship and introduced him to Mom, who came from the right kind of family. Dad chose the path of least resistance. I handed the phone back, unsure what to say. The implications were staggering. The point is, Jason continued, I saw myself making exactly the same mistake, and the thought of a lifetime of regret terrified me beyond words. So what exactly are you saying? I asked carefully. I'm saying I was wrong about everything. The way I let Mom treat you, the way I failed to stand up for you, the way I prioritized keeping peace over protecting the person I love most in the world. For the first time in our conversation, I felt a tiny crack appear in the protective wall I had built around my heart. But words had always been easy for Jason. What about actions? I challenged him. That's exactly why I'm here. I want us to go to couples counseling together. I want to learn how to be the husband you deserve. And I've already told Mom that our relationship cannot continue the way it has been. How did she react to that? I asked, though I could imagine. Not well, he admitted with a rueful smile. There were tears, accusations, threats to cut me out of her will. But I held firm. I told her that if she wants me in her life, she has to respect you and our marriage. If she can't do that, then we'll have very limited contact going forward. I wanted desperately to believe him, but there was still one issue bothering me. What about Rebecca? Jason looked genuinely confused. What about her? Your mother has been meeting with her regularly. Are you in contact with her too? No, he said emphatically. I had no idea Mom was seeing her until you mentioned it that night. I called Rebecca afterward to confront her about it. Apparently, Mom has been orchestrating accidental encounters between us for months. Rebecca only went along with it because Mom told her our marriage was failing. Was that the first time you've spoken to her since we've been together? I pressed. Yes, absolutely, he insisted. Rebecca and I broke up for legitimate reasons, and we both moved on completely. She actually told me to fix things with you, because I seemed happier than she'd ever seen me during our entire relationship. The waitress returned with a concerned expression. Sorry to interrupt again, but I couldn't help overhearing some of your conversation. My mother-in-law was exactly the same way. When I got married, she placed 2 slices of chocolate cake on our table. On the house, sometimes sweet things help during bitter conversations. After she left, Jason and I both managed to laugh softly, breaking some of the tension that had been building. I'm not saying one conversation fixes everything, Jason said seriously. I know I have enormous amounts to prove to you, but I'm asking for a chance to do exactly that. Will you come to one therapy session with me? I've already found someone who specializes in family dynamics and toxic relationships. I considered his request carefully. Despite everything that had happened, I still loved him deeply, and for the first time he seemed to truly understand the scope of the problem and be willing to address it head-on. One session, I agreed cautiously. We can start there and see what happens. The relief on his face was unmistakable and profound. Thank you, Sarah. You won't regret giving us this chance. 3 days later, we sat in Dr. Martinez's office, a warmly appointed space, with comfortable chairs and soft lighting that immediately put me at ease. After brief introductions, she asked us to explain what had brought us to counseling. I let Jason speak first, wanting to hear how he would frame our situation. To my genuine surprise, he was completely honest about his mother's behavior, his enabling of it, and his failure to protect me. I grew up believing that keeping Mom happy was everyone's responsibility, he explained to Dr. Martinez. It was always easier to accommodate her demands than deal with the emotional chaos of challenging her. I never realized how toxic that pattern was until I saw it through Sarah's eyes. And even then, I resisted acknowledging it. Dr. Martinez nodded knowingly. That's very common in families with controlling members. The entire family system adapts to accommodate the controller's needs, often at great cost to everyone else's well-being. When it was my turn, I described my experience of systematic isolation and exclusion, the constant message that I wasn't truly part of the family, despite my marriage to Jason. What I struggle with most, I admitted, is not knowing if Jason and I can move forward when his mother remains such a destructive force in our lives. That's a completely valid concern, Dr. Martinez acknowledged. Jason, are you willing to establish and maintain firm boundaries with your mother to protect your marriage? Yes, absolutely, he said, without any hesitation. I've already started that process. We spent the remainder of the session discussing specific boundary-setting strategies and communication techniques. By the end, I felt cautiously optimistic. For the first time in months, Jason seemed genuinely committed to change, and having a neutral professional validate my experiences was profoundly healing. A week later, Jason proposed a meeting with his parents at Richard's law office, neutral territory away from Patricia's home turf. I agreed, though anxiety churned in my stomach as we rode the elevator to the top floor. Richard greeted us in the reception area, looking formal but with an unfamiliar warmth in his eyes. Thank you both for coming, he said, leading us to a conference room where Patricia waited. She sat rigidly in her chair, perfectly groomed as always, but with obvious tension in her posture. She didn't stand when we entered initially. Patricia, Richard said firmly. We discussed how this meeting would proceed. With visible reluctance, she rose and extended her hand to me. Sarah, thank you for coming. The next hour was one of the most challenging of my entire life. Jason clearly outlined the changes necessary for us to maintain any relationship with his parents, particularly Patricia. These included treating me with consistent respect, acknowledging me as a full family member, and ending all attempts to undermine our marriage. If these boundaries aren't respected, Jason concluded, we will severely limit our contact. That's not a threat, Mom. It's simply what needs to happen for my marriage to survive and thrive. Patricia's face cycled through multiple emotions: disbelief, anger, hurt, and calculated manipulation. Finally, she settled on controlled neutrality. I believe my actions have been misinterpreted, she began carefully. Mum, Jason interrupted. We're not here to debate whether your behavior was hurtful. It absolutely was. The question is whether you can change it going forward. Richard placed his hand over Patricia's in a gesture of support. We've discussed this extensively, Patricia. It's time to make a choice about what kind of relationship you want with our son and daughter-in-law. The term daughter-in-law hung in the air, a reminder of my legitimate place in the family that Patricia had tried so hard to deny. After a long, uncomfortable silence, Patricia spoke slowly. I would like to suggest family counseling. If there have been misunderstandings, perhaps a professional could help us all communicate more effectively. It wasn't the apology I had hoped for, but it was a significant concession from someone as proud as Patricia, a willingness to engage in a process that might lead to genuine change. Derek looked at me, leaving the final decision in my hands. I thought about everything we had been through, the hurt and betrayal, but also the possibility of real healing. I think that could be helpful, I said finally, if everyone commits to the process with complete honesty. Thank you for giving this a chance, Jason said, squeezing my hand. I know it wasn't easy. It's just a beginning, I cautioned. Nothing more. I know, he agreed, but it's a beginning I didn't think was possible just a month ago. Walking out of that building into the bright afternoon sunlight, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a very long time. Hope. Not certainty, not complete trust, but genuine